never wanted to wear a badge. I'm not looking to be a hero. But after you see enough bad things happen to good people, comes a point you can't just sit by anymore. Some folks see this badge as a symbol of authority. For others, it's just a bright, shiny target.
Sometimes it's tough to tell where author Craig Johnson ends and his alter ego, Sheriff Walt Longmire, begins. Both live in rural Wyoming, Craig in Ucross, Walt in fictional Buffalo. Both drive beat-up, battered pickup trucks. Both like big cowboy hats. Both drink Rainier. But here's where the similarities end. Sheriff Longmire is the strong, silent type who lets his action do the talking. Craig Johnson is a natural, outgoing storyteller.
The other thing is like Walt's pretty good. He's a pretty good detective. He's a pretty good investigator like that. So if I'm going to challenge him, then I'm going to have to come up with something that's going to be a little bit complicated for him to deal with.
His first novel introducing Longmire was The Cold Dish, published in 2004. And a very popular TV show followed along with additional titles. 20 years and 20 books later, here we are with First Frost.
So we love that you come, and we want this to be a tradition every year. Like when you're
Please welcome Craig Johnson to the Northwest Passages stage.
It's so good to see you.
First thing I did was check to see if I was still wearing the same clothes that I was last year. It's always because my wife has been working on me for a while now. I had these blue chambray shirts that I wore every time we did an event, And finally, Judy looked at me and she goes, all the other authors look like they're there for an author event. You look like you wandered away from the prison rodeo, and so I've tried to up my game here a little bit, since then. So how are you?
I am doing great, and from what I love the best about you coming here is that this is how you begin your book launch. So none of us know what the book is about. Could you tell us what the book is about?
I can tell you what the book is about. It's actually it's another one of those books that kind of delves back into Walt and Henry's pasts, and what it is that happens is that. Well, I don't want to get into too much detail. This is always the tricky part because I don't want to ruin the book for you guys like that. But I want to give you enough like that so that it's interesting like that, and you think it's worthwhile reading like that. And this is one where Walt. It's mostly about most of the book takes place in 1964. Is what happens like that, and what has happened is that Walt has graduated from USC, where he majored in being an offensive lineman, and then Henry has graduated from Berkeley, where he majored in revolution, and it's they've basically they're losing their deferment is what it is in 1964 and so rather than receive that beautiful all expense paid trip to sunny Southeast Asia and a little known country called Vietnam at that point in time they just go ahead and enlist. They figure we'll go ahead and have some control over our lives like that, and so what it does, it sets them off on this epic road trip. Because Henry has to report to Fort Polk, Louisiana, Tigerland, and then Walt has to report to Parris Island, off the coast of South Carolina. And so it leads to this epic road trip that they have to take going all the way across the country. Well, it's 1964. What's the road that you take to go across the United States? Route 66, right? And so then the big question becomes, how far do they get before they get into trouble? They barely get into Arizona, before they get into trouble. And so it's one of those things where, the title of the book also that is a little bit telling in the sense that you might wonder when it is that cowboys switch their hats. When do you go from a palm leaf hat, to your, fur hat, your wool fur hat? And it's first frost is what it is. When you have your first frost, that's when you switch over to your wool hat like that. Well, it's also kind of a double entendre in the sense that it's kind of like the first frost of Walt and Henry's lives. I mean, they're pretty sure at this point, and at the ripe old age of 22, that they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, like that, and in a sense they are like that. I mean, they've been playing college football for 4 years. They're in the prime of their physical lives and everything, and so they do have that going for them like that. But they're also 22, and they're not very smart like that, and so that causes a certain amount of problems for them themselves. One of my favorite scenes, is the one where they're kind of starting to understand what's going on in this town in Bone Valley, Arizona, and how things are not what they may appear. And Walt looks at Henry and says, "We should report this to the authorities." And Henry's immediate response is, "When has that ever worked out for us?" So they're kind of on the other side of the law at that point in time, like that. And so yeah, it's interesting to see, for me, like that, and it kind of jumps back and forth like that because, of course, there are sequences in the book like that where Walt's doing an officer shooting hearing like that, which may lead to a grand jury like that from the actions that he took in the Longmire defense. And so it kind of bounces back and forth, and the interesting thing is to see, how he has changed, and how, his life as, his military service, like at his service as a sheriff, all of these things. And then again, also, where are those little seeds of, who he was and who he is that have continued on like that, through his life and, made him who he is.
Well, what I am always blown away with your books is just how fast they start. And I mean, it's always, I think I've told you this before, but a good friend of mine said, if you can't get past the 20th or 25th page, it's okay. Right. That is never a problem with your books. But what it struck me when I read A's review is that you're going to start feeling emotions quickly. I don't remember a book of yours starting out so emotionally so quickly.
Yeah, this one definitely was like, I knew that there was going to be an arc to this storyline, and it was going to take a certain amount of time like that before we were really going to get into the meat of the story like that. But, there were things that had to be in place before the story could even start. And so that led to a really big action sequence. Like it's right there at the very beginning of the book. And what it is like they're having, like Walt and Henry, it's like their last day, there on the coast of California at Point Doom in Malibu. And it's like their last day to surf like that. And one of the ongoing jokes all the way through the book is everybody keeps looking at Walt and saying, "You're too big to surf." Like, and he is. He's way too big for it. But anyway, he, it's an instance where they're there, like, and there's a ship that's starting to come around the point out there on the rocks like that. But the storm is coming in like that, and so the ship hits the rocks like and starts to go down like that. And so it's one of those situations where you either do something or you don't. And so he and Henry both, dive in and go out there to try and drag as many of these guys out of the surf as they possibly can. And what's interesting is that was an actual occurrence that happened with Duke Kahanamoku. You guys remember Duke Kahanamoku was like basically the god of surfing, from Hawaii like that, and he was also like an Olympic swimmer with Johnny Weissmuller. And they actually had that happen. They were out there on the beach, and this ship, got hit and was by the rocks and was going down. And they actually went out. I can't remember how many times it was, like half a dozen times. They swam through the surf in the storm to help drag these guys back on their surfboards and get them out of there. And, it just was, I remembered that story, and I thought, okay, that's a pretty good story to have happen. One of my other favorite stories, I have to do that one really quick, like this. There was one time they were doing a promotional tour for some of the Tarzan movies, and Johnny Weissmuller, like it was, Tarzan, like in those old movies, like it, and Duke Kahanamoku was a really good friend of his because they had swum together like that, in the German Olympics. And there was one instance where they were doing the tour like that, and I think they were in Central America or something, and they were touring for these like Tarzan movies, and like all of a sudden they got surrounded going from this one town to the next, and it was like all of these revolutionaries that had stopped them like that, and the guys are trying to explain, who these guys are and everything like this, and and they're kind of dire situation. They might get killed, for goodness sake. Like, and all of a sudden, Johnny Weissmuller leans back and goes, "Oh!" And they're like, "Tarzan!" Like, so, and they let him go. So
there was a point in this book that you tell me has happened before, but I had not seen it. Spokane is mentioned in this book.
Yes.
Yeah. So we talked earlier. Can you just do that every time? I mean, like we clearly love you the most. So just like as a little wink to us, like
No, I only put places I like in my books.
I mean, I'm thinking, I'm not. Maybe somebody likes Gonzaga.
You never can tell.
They just come through to go to Zips.
Or some kind of dangerous newspaper man or something like that might be like.
I'm not that one. So I was just going to ask if you could please do that again.
I will.
Okay,
I will.
right,
I promise.
So I want to get A out here, but you brought up the well, let me go. Did you remember? I tried to come visit you once. I was really impressed. But you weren't home.
I know. Well, that's part of the problem with my life. Like it is, I'm rarely home. But the door's always unlocked. You can just go, feed the horses, take care of everything. Like that, so it's not a problem, honestly.
Well, that leads to your great idea. When we were trying to really think of something great, you said we should bring out A.
Yep.
And we had almost had this happen before, but the actors' strike got in the way of A being able to come, so we wasn't able. But we made it this time. So we've put together a little bit of a highlight reel for him.
Oh my goodness!
You want to watch it with us?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
Here we go. Here we go.
I'm in the mood to tear it up. I'm in my prime for tearing it up. I dig tearing up that stuff. I just
career. Hey. How fun was that? Boy, you've kissed a lot of ladies.
Somebody's got to do it.
So what I was really hoping was, I normally one that has to ask a lot of the questions. I think that you guys should ask a lot of the questions, but I'm going to get it started. So your character's not in the books, but you are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Craig has this marvelous habit of putting people he knows in his books, and he did that for me in The Depth of Winter. I got to play a doctor with a certain bent, and I'll just say, if someone you respect is going to sum you up, it should be Craig doing it. It just was one of the most lovely kind of fantasies about what really matters to me in real life the most, and he nailed it. And it's Depth of Winter. The guy's name is A Martinez, in case you couldn't figure it out. Loved it, yeah. So that's a thing. Yeah.
And you read his books. When they come out, you're reading them. You love to post the selfies with the books. It always makes me happy.
Yeah. I'm hooked, And it's really amazing to me how many people, still say, there are books? But it's just, it's such a treasure to, to be able to hold on to it. And I think, like a lot of people, since the show ended, it's kind of, it's a bit of a life preserver, to actually be able to still look at the characters, even though there's no new episodes of the show, the characters are still alive in those books.
So when you were reading this book, it caught you pretty early. Were you in a public place when that happened?
Yeah. I was in a plane reading, and I've been incredibly busy, praise be. But I normally can kind of pick up a book and just read it. But lately, I've had to pick and choose my moments. And I was just flying back to Los Angeles for Mother's Day, actually, from working in Santa Fe. And I picked up the book, and I'm just reading the beginning of it, and, page 18, 19, and 20, there's this unbelievable, he talked about the thing with the Duke, that's the history of a Duke, saving people in the mean surf in Malibu. And there it is, except now it's Walt doing it and Henry doing it, and, it's so emotional, so scary, so terrifying. And then, this cop, sees these guys doing this thing, and they look like they might be up to something bad. And the cop says, "Well, what do you mean? You swam out there to save these people? Do you know them?" No, you don't know them. Well, then why would you do that? And Walt says, "Because it's the right thing to do." And I just went, and I thought, oh, that's not the kind of sound that somebody in the plane should make with no warning, So, just a honk. So I had to shut the book and stop that. But that's the thing, right? I mean, that's treasure. In my life, I live for catharsis. I want catharsis, and that was delivered.
So tell me how you two became friends, because you've even stayed at his house before.
Yeah, I got to stay. He invited me a few times, and I've been crazy busy, and mainly my wife is crazy busy. She's working full time, and it's like hard to go to Longmire Days and spend 4 days sort of more or less ignoring your family while you interface with the thousands of people who come to the fan. It's one of the great events in our lives to meet all these people, and then the idea of like having her go home to work and me stay longer has never really struck me as being viable. But then my daughter Ren, she of the wisdom, said, when people ask you to come visit them at their house, it's not okay to just keep saying your excuse for why you can't. You know, when people ask you to do that, you should do it. So I did it, and it was lovely. I got to stay in the guest house. I had my own house, and you know, I could get up in the middle of the night and pee off the balcony if I had to. Nobody would get hurt.
That's a great Wyoming tradition, actually.
It's the best. It was great.
Craig, how do you want to interject into all this?
It was very easy, for us to be friends because A reads, and I'm going to rat out a lot of your fellow actors, because there are a lot of actors that just don't, and I don't know if that's because they don't want it to have an effect, on what they're doing, or how they do it, or something like that, because obviously they're bringing their own thoughts and process to these characters and to have that voice override all of that with all the detail that comes into a 350 400 page novel in comparison with say a 42 page teleplay. It's two different breeds of cat. And so the nice thing was that A's character specifically is not in the books. But the way I've described it many times before, though, he actually kind of is that, because what I think that the producers, kind of had in mind was, because the Henry that's in the books is a little more militant than the one that's in the TV show that Lou Diamond Phillips plays. And I think what they did was kind of take that militant aspect of, Henry and slide it off over to the side and kind of used it to develop, Jacob, I think, in many ways, which I think was a smart move because it made for a conflictive kind of relationship with Walt, which is always what they're looking for, that in TV and in film is always dramatic conflict, for the characters that. But I think what it was is A was not intimidated, first of all, because, his character wasn't in there, so he could jump right in and read it and not have an effect on him at all. And the other thing is he's extraordinarily intelligent and incredibly insightful. And so if you've read, which you have, because I've been on to him now for 14 years to write because I get these emails from him that are these incredibly composed thought processes, and I see his stuff on social media and everything, and I'm you should get at least a part-time job doing this. So I'm very proud of you that you finally were able to get him under contract.
Yeah,
Very nice.
He doesn't know it.
But he's now an indentured servant.
No, more of just a journalist.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's just, that, it means more to me than I can say that you actually decided to start hammering me like that. And I've been doing it, and it's funny, a lot of people, I've written a movie. I've been writing it for a long time, and somebody said, let me read it, and I showed it to her, and she said, well, I think you should change it, and then I'll be interested in helping you. So I changed it, so now it's even a longer time. But the thing is that a lot of people talk to me and say, well, you don't post as much about serious things as you once did. What's going on with that? And I just realized that it's just that you only have so much bandwidth. Luckily, I've been working a lot, so I don't have a whole lot of time, and I don't really have the time to post sometimes in ways that if you make certain posts, you're going to have to sign up for defending them. Mm-hmm. And it's time.
And you do that. I mean, you don't just throw it out there and start a fire and then run away. I've seen you where you will answer stuff right after every single remark that people make. I mean, that's an incredible amount of time and energy that goes into that.
Literally, that's exactly what it is, just time. And if you don't do it, you're doing a disservice, right? It can turn into a food fight on your page, and you need to nip that. So I've sort of been picking my moments, but I'm working really hard on this story, and I wouldn't have been telling it had not Craig given me the kind of seal of approval that I could do such a thing. I mean, literally, that's the truth. So thanks for that. And hopefully it'll get made. That's the prayer. And if it does, I hope you'll all come and see it. That's the thing. Yeah. Thank you.
in the video we showed, the last scene from Longmire,
Yeah.
where you take a hit or two.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Who directed that episode?
Chris Shulock, who
Yeah.
actually directed the first one I was in too. Did he direct the pilot also?
I think he did.
Yeah. He's a great director. And yeah, it was something. What a great episode that was.
Yeah. And the episode that Lou Diamond Phillips directed.
Right. Oh yeah, that's the one where I got beat on.
Yeah. Tell me.
That's the right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good story. You know, Cassidy. What an amazing creature Cassidy is on every level. And she, she and I had this relationship. Jacob had hired her, and, it was going along. And then, of course, one thing led to another, and she's sure that I've done something terrible to Henry and all this. So she lost her mind on me that day. It wasn't me, it was Jacob. But she has this dog. This dog actually passed, this beautiful sheepdog named Shasta that was her companion. And that dog was with her all the time. And the dog was always a little skeptical of me, I always thought. And whenever I'd have a personal conversation with her, the dog was sort of waiting for it to be over. And so Lou directs this episode, and he invites the entire crew and company to come to his apartment so he can screen it. He's real proud of it. He did the rough cut. He did a great job. So we're sitting there, and there's a couch, right? And then I'm sitting on the floor with my back against the edge of the couch, and there's 4 people on the couch, including Rob. And Cassidy is sitting on the far other side of the couch from me, and off Cassidy's side is Shasta, her dog, sort of like bookending where I'm sitting, sort of slightly against the edge of the couch. And so, we do this. He shows the episode where she's beating me with a stick, and I'm, talking mad back at her and stuff. And it's dark in there, and he finishes, and the credits roll, and he flips on the lights in his apartment. And this dog leapt from the opposite side of the couch and bit me really hard, drew blood, and went boom, boom, like that. Literally just like guerrilla warfare, just attacking my leg. And I'm like, what just happened? And Rob goes, that dog just bit you. Well, thank God somebody saw it, because it happened really quickly. And I just got to thinking, smart dog. Yeah, that happened.
Really good acting. I think that's what it was.
It was really good acting. Yeah, but it was just great that they did that. That was one of the many beautiful things they did with Jacob, is to make him get involved with Walt's daughter. Brilliant.
So now that you've read the book, what questions do you want to ask Craig about it? I say we get the hard ones.
Well, we can talk about what's going on in the book now, right? Everyone here is going to read it tonight anyway, right?
We're going to read it tonight, right?
But there's a really interesting theme. My father spoke about this so movingly one time when my daughter interviewed him about his experiences in the war. But you talk about, our relationship with Japan on 2 levels, one of which is the internment camps that these boys, the old internment camp that the boys stumble into in this journey. And the other is the history behind Tadashi Sato, is his name? Sato? Yeah. He had that history of being involved in that hideous human experimentation thing that happened in the Japan voiced while they were occupying China. And those 2 things are reminiscent, and Tadashi mentions this in the book, sort of calls, the American version of that into question. And I was just wondering how that came to you. What was the entry to go there in those 2 ways? Did one come before the other, do you recall?
Well, I knew that, that there had to be some kind of historical reference, not only for the camps themselves like that, because that was going to be a major issue, within the storyline like that, but then also something that was going to illustrate, the real horror of the things that can happen, during wartime. And I started like doing a little bit of the research on that, and it was just so absolutely petrifyingly, frightening that I thought, okay, well, that's going to be very illustrative of that aspect of the war, because we're talking about it. This was a point in time also. It was interesting because since the book takes place in 1964, it's only 20 years. After the war, like it's not that long. Like it's not like they're talking about the Crimean War in 1964. It's World War II, which is not that long ago. And within that context, that was the major difference. I knew that book could not take place, in the modern day, because the contextual aspects of it would be lost. Nobody would really get it like that. And the fact that that Mike, like the private investigator, talks about his experiences in the war. And to try and get as many actual experiences that would give me more of like a panorama of like what that war was like. That's when it all fell into place as far as that was concerned. It's interesting because you do research but you never. It's kind of like research on faith, because you never really know. Maybe you'll use this, maybe you won't. And the method that I always use is if I remember it. If I carry it in my head, then that's something that I need to tell you guys about. That's a story that I need to relay to you guys. And I remember that there was actually there was one of the internment camps in Hart Mountain, which is like over near Powell, like in Cody and Park County. And I remember years and years ago, like decades ago, like that whenever you drive over towards Yellowstone or Cody or anything like that, you drive along and you would look over at the side of the road across the railroad tracks there, and you would see the barracks that were there and the gun towers that were there. And you could just drive up. Literally, it was an abandoned site, and you could literally drive right up in between those bunkhouses like that. And the windows were all broken out, and the doors were like off the hinges. They were stripped just from the wind and the cold and everything. And you would walk around in there, and they've done an amazing job. They've got like an interpretive center and a museum and a theater there. Like out here in the last 10 years, they really invested the state of Wyoming into like making it something that's not going to be lost, and disappeared like that. And so they've done an amazing job, and it's beautiful at what they've done, but I don't know if it has the same effect of like walking up there on the top of that hill and those like doors are just hanging in the wind, and it kind of is petrifying there for a moment to think about how many of those people were there and were not allowed to leave like that. And so I did a ton of research on Hart Mountain, because I kept thinking, well, at some point in time I'm going to use that. At some point in time I'll have something happen at Hart Mountain, and like they'll have an intriguing aspect of that. And it was actually that was in the works. Like we've been stopped at production of the television show for like 7 years, but you'll remember there was one episode where they had, there was a portion that took place in an internment camp, a portion of the storyline in one of the episodes, and that's because I gave the producers my whole folder of potential, future novels, and they utilized every single one of them like that, which is kind of interesting. And but I just thought, eventually I'll get to that. But the difficulty is that it kind of had lost some of its, the heart of it. It's simply because we are so removed from that now. Yeah. We're rapidly approaching a period in time where that White War is going to be almost 100 years old, like that, for goodness sake. And so I thought there needed to be more of an immediacy, like that. And I thought, okay, well, when they're going across that country in 1964, it's going to echo back, because they're facing a war is what they're doing. This is the first frost in these two characters' lives. As I was saying before, they think they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, but they know where they're going. They know what's going to happen. They know what's been happening there for a number of years. And so it's kind of the first frost of their lives. And so it was interesting to me that I thought, okay, well, I'm going to use all that Hart Mountain information. Little did I know what I was going to do was pick it up and move it to Arizona was what I was going to do, and have it be down there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's,
there's the long answer.
That's good.
So.
No, there was a similar answer when I asked about the chess strategy last year. So I always love it when when it's so clear how much research you've done. I love that. Any other questions you got about the book? Because I've got a couple of your questions here.
This This is the hard part because he worries about giving things away.
So yeah. So let me back up though. So A is a movie actor. You know, he doesn't have to do things a lot live. But did you also know he was a semi-pro baseball player? We had to do everything live. And the story gets even weirder. His uncle played baseball for the Spokane Indians.
Yeah, I know. And believe me, I had the story a little bit wrong. You know how the stories go in families, you know. I had the story that he'd played multiple seasons in Spokane, and Spokane was AAA for the Dodgers. Turns out, no, Spokane was more like B or CC for...
Yeah, this was pre them being the AAA for the Dodgers.
Yeah, right. And so, but Spokane just bloomed in my mind. God, he was in Spokane, you know. And I love that dude. He was a baseball freak like me, and you know, he spent 6 years in the minors trying to make the show. In '59, the Dodgers come to LA. In '58, they come to LA, and my mom says, "Look, go read the paper." And I'm going, "What?" Do you know the sports page? And they're our bums now. And there's the pictures of all these Brooklyn Dodgers. And I was already onto them because they beat the Yankees in '55. And I thought, wow, these guys must be badass if they could beat the Yankees. I didn't realize that they'd lost the previous 7 seasons in a row to the Yankees. But, you know, I was all about them. And they came, and I thought, well, that must be an omen that I'm going to get to be on the Dodgers. They came to Los Angeles. So for me, it just seemed like it was part of the storybook. Anyway, they win the National League pennant in 1959, and my Uncle Jimmy goes to my mom, says, so A could miss school to go to the World Series, right? And she goes, sure, she's a pushover, right? She's going to. So for 3 days at the Los Angeles Coliseum, which is a football stadium that they had put a fence in right field and made a giant fence over the left field thing so we could play baseball there. And my Uncle Jimmy bought me a ticket in the nosebleed seats out in the right field. And I sat next to a guy that I never met who bought me popcorn and candy and Cokes all the time, all 3 days. And Koufax pitched one of those games and won it. And I mean, it was a dream come true. So, you know, Spokane, Uncle Jimmy, Jimmy Dow. Yeah.
So we got you something. So. Oh my God. We wanted you to have a Spokane Indians jersey. So I was explaining to you yesterday about it's great, about the jersey being in Salish. And the best part of that is it means that people in Boise don't know how to say it. So that's why I wanted you to talk about your Uncle Jimmy. Yeah. So I gave one to Craig, and he hasn't worn it yet.
You know what? It's hanging in my closet. It actually has the fish, the colors like it.
Yep, the red band, right. But hey, will you wear it once though? Since Craig never wore his one.
No, I promise I wear it.
Okay, all right.
I'll wear it to Dodger Stadium, actually.
Yeah.
Dodger Stadium is a holy place in my life, so I'll be there with it. Yeah.
So it isn't very often that we used to try to read parts of the book at a lot of our events. We haven't done it in a couple of years. We have an actor up here. Maybe we bring back that tradition for today.
I'm game. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about that, you know, as soon as I got done with my work in Santa Fe, I picked up the book again to kind of go through it and think about, you know, what I'd like to ask you about. We would talk about stuff, and I didn't get beyond one section. I just read it and then read it and then read it. And I was going to ask you about it actually, but I'm flying over and I stop off in Denver and I get a message from Craig. Would you do me a solid? And there's a section of the book that I think it would be nice if you were to read it. And I just had read it 3 times in the previous 2 hours. So that sort of speaks to, you know, the degree to which we resonate. Wow. Yeah. Anyway, this is fairly early on in the story, and I should mention there's a character, Over Jenny. Over Jenny is a 1,000-pound mule. And Craig, Walt, you see how that works? Walt has been knocked unconscious with some giant wooden object which has broken off partly in the back of his head and has been dumped and left unconscious in the middle of the desert. And he gets kissed into consciousness by this 1,000-pound mule. The mule belongs to a character named Pat Fujita.
That's the only romance in my book.
I took another sip of the sake and then reached out and picked up the bloody splinter from the surface of the table, hoping to change the subject. Pat, do you know that Bone Valley is haunted? He shook his head in dismissal. This land is haunted by many things. This is the story of the ghost of somebody, maybe more than one somebody, who died here, and that this Hanya, a demonic and vengeful spirit, is out there seeking revenge on those who betrayed her. His eyes stayed steady on mine. A very old wives' tale concocted by a vengeful wife. Noriko also referred to her as Hanya, which means wisdom. Fujita shrugged in response. Finishing off the tiny cup, I sat it back on the table. You don't know anything about that? A child wearing a theatrical mask back in Bone Valley? A child? I'm assuming, because whoever it was, they were very small, so a child, yes. I don't know anything about that. Noriko does. He stared at the table, and I noticed every time I mentioned her, a sadness crept into his expression. She is a young woman with an overly active imagination. Pouring him another, I sat the bottle down and then nudged the cup toward him with my fingertips. I've seen this demon too. He stayed still for a moment and then reached across and poured another for me. What does it look like, this devil of yours? A horned demon, but sad. I picked up my cup and took another sip. I think whoever it is that they tend a shrine for Mei Maiko Oda in the old camp. Noriko says it's her that does it, but I think she's lying. Now, why would she do that? Mei Maiko Oda. Do you know her? He knocked the sake back in his fashion, his eyes watering from the alcohol content. At least I think that's what it was. Why do you care? I have this thing about the truth, and I think it's running low in this valley. I would have a hard time arguing that. He actually laughed. Have you ever heard of the Yoki Onna? The what? He nodded his head and then spoke in a low voice. The Yuki Onna is a yokai, or snow spirit, who lives in the frozen lands of the mountains, taking the lives of those foolish enough to wander into her domain. He nudged his tiny cup toward me again. I obliged him, watching as he tipped the cup up and drank the entirety again. In the 13th century, there was a young samurai who went into the world to seek his fortune, but was retained by a great daimyo, a feudal landowner. The young samurai was dispatched to deliver a message of dire military importance to another daimyo in an adjacent kingdom. But after days of traveling, found his way blocked by armies of the invading Mongols. I reached across and primed the pump by filling his cup once more. He picked it up, but this time he sipped. Realizing that there was no way for him to fight so many, he was forced to traverse a snow-covered mountain pass. The young samurai had almost made it to the precipice when a sudden storm struck, causing him to lose his way. Trapped in the crevasse of a small canyon that was rapidly filling with snow, he drew his sword and prepared to commit harikiri rather than slowly freeze to death. Just as he was getting ready to plunge the blade into himself, he thought he saw something in the snow, an outline of a woman. Raising his face, he imitated the character in his story, seeming to look past me, his eyes searching for something, before leaping up and grabbing the needle from the surface of the table and holding it like a sword. Turning the savage blade, he pointed it at the figure and said, "Stay away. I am Kamakura Shogunate in procession of the Kirisugoman and will kill you if you draw nearer." He turned his face to deliver an aside, his beard swaying as he continued in a more conversational tone. The figure did not go away, but it did not come closer, and rapidly the young samurai began freezing to death. He had just given up hope and started to turn the sword on himself again when the figure moved in close. He started to turn the sword back, but discovered that his arm was frozen and would no longer move. Horrified, he watched as the figure pressed against him. It was a woman, a strange woman, as pale as snow and covered in a fine sheen of frost, who placed her arms around him, holding him very close. Hugging himself, Fujita continued with the story. Her eyes captured his, and she spoke in a haunting, whispering voice. "You are so very young." Pat nodded as the character, acting out the shivering and dying man. Yes. He turned back to me. It was the Yuki Onna, and she took pity on him because he was so young, telling him to close his eyes and she would save him. But he did not believe her and said that if he closed his eyes, she would take him away. She told him, "No, I will save you, but under one condition. You must never tell anyone of our meeting." The young samurai promised and closed his eyes. Fujita took the needle and stuck it into the table. The next morning he awoke and discovered that the snow was gone, and in its place wildflowers blanketed the mountainside, and the breeze was warm and caressing. Continuing on his way, he delivered the message to the daimyo, and an epic battle was won. Years later, the samurai was a man of great importance who had won many campaigns, but was ready to retire and lead a life of leisure. He had always remembered the mountain pass of his youth and what had happened to him there. So he returned to that place to find a small cabin in the canyon, the exact spot where he had almost lost his life. Picking up his cup, he took another sip. Standing there, he watched as a beautiful woman came from the tiny structure and called out to him, asking if he was tired and would he like food and drink and to rest in her home. He agreed, and as the months passed, he would return there and visit with her, finally making her his wife. He set the cup back down. They lived happily together for many years. When one evening, the aged samurai sat by the open window, looking out at a lovely summer evening, and began telling his wife the story of what had happened to him all those years ago when the mysterious Yuki Onna saved his life. As he finished the story, he sensed her hand on his shoulder, and it felt very cold. He turned to watch as his wife's face grew pale, paler than any person he had ever seen, and a luster of frost crept over her entire body. He placed a hand on the table, pulling out the needle and once again holding it like an undrawn sword. Bless you. His wife's eyes met his as he stumbled back, overturning his stool and falling against the wall, clutching at his sword as she screamed a sound like the splitting of great trees with the volume of a typhoon. Try as he might, he could not draw the weapon from its scabbard, almost as if it were frozen there. She drew closer and enveloped him in her arms and forced his eyes shut. I poured him another and watched as he picked up the tiny cup, holding it before him like a sacrament. The aged samurai blinked open his eyes in that last moment of his life and could see that his wife and the summer cabin were gone. And in their place, he was once more frozen in the crevasse, covered in snow and ice, dead. He lifted the cup with a great deal more ceremony, raising it to his lips and sipping. In the face of such a performance, I wasn't sure what to say. You're quite the storyteller. He drank some more, finishing it off. Thank you, I don't get many opportunities. He refilled my cup and then went back to the door and began putting on his boots. As I rose, he waved for me to sit. Rest, you have a great deal of traveling to do tonight. He gestured toward the one bunk. Sleep. I have work to do, but I will be back late in the afternoon to help you get ready. I sipped some more sake, holding the warm liquid in my mouth and then swallowing. Is it really going to take me 3 nights? He finished lacing the tall boots and stood, reaching a hand out to stroke the petals of the Christmas cactus. He looked to be in good shape, so perhaps less. I don't have 3 nights. He grinned. Then perhaps we will find a way to speed you up. But you said you didn't have a car or a truck. Resetting his hat, he thumbed the latch and pushed open the door, allowing the glare of the midday sun to strike at the threshold. No, I don't. I'm not taking over Jenny. I would not allow you to. He stepped through the door as I stopped him with my words. So, Pat, what's that story of yours supposed to mean anyway? Fujita stood there, backlit by the blinding light, just before he closed the door. Be very careful in your dealings with demons, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. You can see why you want to read that more than once. Yeah.
I have to ask. So hearing A read Craig's words, you want more, right? I mean, an audiobook would be good, but let's just talk about like the show for a second. The books are great. Love them. Let's get this movie thing going, okay? What's it going to take?
You know, it's interesting like that because I mean, you know, as I've said before, like you know, we're like 7 years out of production, I think it is, like, and the show is still like one of the top 10 to 20 shows on Netflix every other week, and so I don't know. I mean, I think it's a Warner Brothers deal basically. Like it's their, the ball's in their court. Like
Well,
that. And
that's one thing I'm wondering about. Do they control it in perpetuity?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Like, yeah, they did, like, I think it was 63 episodes, like, and so they pretty much have control. Anything that gets done has to go through them, which is not the worst thing that could happen. It's like, the largest movie studio in the world. Right. So, that lends itself to that, like that. But, it's just a question of, like, them figuring out, what it is that they've got on their hands and what they need to do with it. So we'll see what happens, so you never can say never.
It's just great to hear say your dialogue.
Isn't it wonderful? You know what? I'm gonna be copying that for the next 2.5 weeks. Just so you know, everywhere I go, I'll be doing an A Martinez impersonation. Is what I'll be doing.
So one of the best parts of Northwest Passage is when we turn the questions over to the audience. But before we do, I want to talk about the time on the show. It feels like the cast and you were all close.
Pretty amazingly so. And everybody I talk to, that's in the show, pretty much, because my experiences are rather limited, as far as the association with TV shows and everything like that. Yours, on the other hand, though, are massive. But it all kind of works with, I would assume, the personalities that you have on the show, that. I would imagine that it has to have that. It has a large scale effect. So it seemed like Longmire had a strange kind of chemistry as far as that was concerned.
Totally, and I had heard. I think I might have mentioned this to you. I'd heard through the just people I know. I have a really good friend who worked with Greer on The Closer. Greer Shepard was the showrunner. And she said, and I heard this from other people too. Greer Shepard has a habit of vetting the people she hires, not just the actors and the producers, but everybody on the crew. Everybody basically is sort of looked at carefully to see if they're squared away emotionally. She likes to hire grown-ups. Mm-hmm. And,
which is not easy in Hollywood.
There's
I can say that. I live in Ucross, so it's not hard for me.
But it's true, it's I've been on shows where, there's just somebody that's just a jerk, right? And you got to work with them day after day after. My wife would say, "Gosh, you smell so bad when you come home from work from this show. It's like you're just like cortisol all day long. You're in self-defense mode all day long." But Greer, you hear the story. Greer assembles people that get along, that are squared away. And I swear it was like that on Longmire. It was down to the caterers. Everybody was just a delight to be around. And you just, you really do fall in love. You're pulling together, so you're under pressure, which always tends to help people bond. And when they're good people, it makes it really easy. They're treasured friendships, and it extends to the audience as well, because of Longmire days. I have so many genuine friends, people I see, if I'm traveling near them or they're traveling near me, we'll make it a point of checking in with each other, let alone in social media, because, the fans and the actors were given a chance to meet each other and get to know each other. And it's like nothing else that's ever happened in my career. It's a treasure.
Yeah. Well, I want to turn it over to the audience here. So if you raise your hand, we'll have Christy come bring the mic to you. And we'd really like it to be a question, not a monologue.
Thank you for being right here. I don't have to move all the way up there. I appreciate that.
Oh, but can I get somebody in the balcony to raise their hand, though? Because I want to see her do that.
Thanks.
So this is to Craig. When were you at the Heart Mountain relocation camp? Do you remember what year it was?
Oh, a bunch of different times. Because that's only about 3 hours away from where my ranch is.
Right.
So anytime I was going over to Park County, I had to do library events or something like that, it just called to me. If I'd be driving by there, I'd have to pull over and just wander through there because it was, it's haunted That place has got, something about it that resonates and so for me, I knew something was going to have to come out of that for too long. But I was there just no more than maybe a month ago, as a matter of fact, and stopped in there because I had not seen the new interpretive center and the museum and the little theater and all this kind of stuff. And it was kind of funny like that because I walked in like that and, you know, and they were like, Craig Johnson, like that. And I said, yeah, like that. And they said, we heard that your next book has something to do with, you know, the internment camps. And I was like, yeah, it actually does. Like that. And so I'm probably going to be doing an event there at Heart Mountain probably before the year's out, like I would imagine. So
I asked because my folks homesteaded in Heart Mountain, and we lived in one of the barracks as I was born in 1950.
Yeah.
And we played there as kids later on when we moved out onto the homestead, which was 4 miles away.
Okay.
And I recall the tar paper blowing in the wind in the cold, cold winters, and it had an impact on me that center doesn't.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. You know, when you'd go in there and the wind would be blowing through where the windows were blown out and the doors were hanging like on one hinge, you know, and things like that. It just, you know, you could see those poor people got loaded up like that, you know, and with what they could carry. You know, that was all they were allowed to bring with them was what they could carry in their hands, you know, and brought, you know, they didn't have the clothing or anything to, you know, they'd never seen a Wyoming winter, you know, on the high plains like that before. And so it was something completely different than anything that they'd ever had any kind of association with at all. Like that. And so yeah, it's you know, it's a pretty amazing thing. And I'm proud of the state of Wyoming that they you know, I can't remember how many millions they put into it like that, but they decided, okay, we're not going to let this just like fall over and go away. You know, what we're going to do is we're going to, like, you know, actually put a museum there, an interpretive center and everything like that, so that when people come there, they can, you know, see, you know, what it was actually like. And, you know, I still remember, you know, there's a line that I used that was actually from, you know, an individual that I'd spoken to who had actually been in one of the internment camps. And we were talking about, you know, were they there, you know, for their own protection and all this, because that was one of the excuses that was used, you know, it was for their own protection like that. And I remember the one line that he gave me like that was the one he said where those gun towers, the guns were pointed in, you know, and it was like, okay, well, there you go. That's that argument pretty much in a nutshell now, isn't it? And then the other story that I included was the one that a good friend of mine was the daughter of the internment camp. You know, he was like the supervisor. And I asked her like that because for a crime fiction writer, you know, you're always looking for some kind of criminal element, right? And so I said, you know, well, was there ever any kind of like, you know, criminal activity or anything like that? And she goes, there was one chronic problem that they had like that. And I said, what was that? And she said, whenever the surrounding town folk would find out that like there was an artist, you know, who was in the camp that didn't have art supplies, they would smuggle art supplies into them. Or if there was a musician that didn't have, you know, their violin, they would sneak, a violin into them, which kind of gives you at least a little bit of hope for humanity to think that, you know, at least that was going on, and maybe one of the darkest points, you know, in our society, like that people were aware of it and trying to make it better. So,
All right.
This is for Mr. Martinez. I believe you're working with another gentleman from the Longmire series in Dark Winds, the gentleman that plays Joe Leaphorn's character, Tony Hillerman's character.
Yeah.
Joe Leaphorn.
Yeah, that's Zahn McClernand, the great Zahn McClernand, who's really a brother to me. I first worked with him 30-some years ago in another project that was workshopped through Robert Redford's auspices. It was a miniseries called Grand Avenue, and he played a young married guy. He and his wife were, you know, interested in the political stuff that my character was driving in the community. And I just had one scene with him, maybe two, but I was just instantly impressed. You know, he's such an extraordinary person, and I loved working with him, and since then we've worked 5 different times together. He played my son in a movie called In Embryo, and I've written for him. The thing that I've written has a really important place for him in it. I just love the dude. I got to meet his mom at Longmire Days. He brought his mom, Loretta, and she's a legendary Lakota activist of long standing. She's a sun dancer. And we took a long ride from Buffalo back to some airport, and I got to sit at her knee in the back of a big old fancy car and just like ask her questions about her family life and Zahn as a kid and stuff. And you know, it's just he's my brother, and I'll tell you what, you know, he's so happy to finally be the #1 guy on a show. But I want to tell you, there is no rest for the #1 guy on a show. I check in with him every chance I get just to say, how are you, man? Are you okay? Because, I mean, it's just, you know, they just boom, boom, boom. But he's great. It's a part that he's perfectly suited for, and he's doing a tremendous job. If you guys haven't seen that show yet, it's called Dark Winds. It's on AMC, and it's a thing of beauty. I come in on season 2, and we're 2/3 of the way through season 3 right now, and it's a beautiful thing. So I recommend it highly. Robert Redford and George R.R. Martin of Game of Thrones producing it. Really great.
That's actually Judy's favorite story about Zahn, because whenever we invite the actors, like when we started out like that, they said it was basically just +1, which meant you could bring one person with you. And it was really funny because Judy was on the phone with Zahn, and I could hear him, and he says, "Judy, so it's okay if I bring somebody with me?" And Zahn is like, he's very popular with the ladies, okay? And so we're thinking, well, okay, wonder who's going to show up with him, and then he goes, "Is it okay if I bring my mom?" He could have done anything from that point on, He was like gold.
Really
Hi, this is for Craig. I'm interested in your creative process. Do you start writing directly on the computer, or how do you go about your?
You mean like the
craft?
Mechanics of like the tool that I use?
Yeah.
Or yeah. Well, I actually started out with a mechanical typewriter. That was the only thing that I could afford. Back in the days when they had electric typewriters, and that was beyond my ability to buy. And so I found an old Royal mechanical typewriter, and that's what I started off on, like that. And then nowadays, with the technology being the way it is, you really you would have to have somebody that would have to, move it over to a computer, like that. If you did do it at mechanical typewriter or by hand, I hear some writers that actually feel better when they write by hand. I do my notes by hand like that, but then I have to work on the computer just simply because for the copy editors, for the editors, for everybody that's involved with the process of it going back and forth like that, then you have no choice. You basically have to use a computer at that point in time. And then as far as the work effect like that, my energies are always at their best early in the morning. It's a ranch, so the first thing I do is make sure everything's okay at the ranch. The animals always come first, like that. And then once I get that done, then I can sit down and make a pot of coffee and get started writing, like that. And then whenever Judy gets up, like that, I'll have breakfast with her, like that. And then I'll write all the way through till lunchtime or something, and then come down. I'll read her what I've been working on that morning, like that, and then go back up in the afternoon and usually write in the afternoon, because it's a joy, to me. It's not a job. I really love what I do. I really just, I think it's the same thing I would hope that you guys have with that world, that I can't wait to get back to that world and climb back in and see what those characters are doing and what's happening, And so it's, we were talking about it backstage, in the old statement that I've always heard is that, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm sure it's the same way that A feels about acting. It's it's kind of like sports in the sense that when it's working, it's kind of like everything's right in the box and you're knocking them out of the fence. Everything's going so well. You don't want to leave it alone. You want to stay in there and keep working for as long as you can. Yeah. I'm sure it's the same with the newspaper business too.
Oh yeah, my boss thinks I don't work all the time. No. I had the best job in the world right up until the moment I screwed up the crossword puzzle. Never seen anger like that.
I bet.
Craig, why did you decide the character Henry Standing Bearer to never use contractions? I think it adds a lot to his character.
Thank you. That's, it's interesting because, I mean, A can talk to this too, like that, but I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with voice. You really need to like differentiate the voices, whenever you're doing something like this. That's why it was wonderful to listen to him do the reading, because that differentiation that he's doing, between Walt, and Fujita, like that, it was, and then like in him, the way he shifts his voice when he's telling the story, that was really, a master class, like I had to kind of listen to, which is what I need before I get back out there on the road for another 2.5 weeks and try and read that same passage. But it's, I'm always telling students like that how the physicalities of your characters really don't matter because you're going to describe that one time. But that character is going to speak for the rest of that novel. And so you really need to be able to make sure that they have a voice that, differentiates them from all of the other characters. And I remember like that how that happened was I was talking with my good buddy Marcus Red Thunder, who's kind of the model for Henry in the books, like that. And we were doing some kind of public event or something like that. And now I would notice that he would like do this like lampooning thing every once in a while, where he would like slip into this B-movie Indian speech where he did not use contractions, like it. And I would watch people like it, and they would like lean in, when he was doing this. And finally, I called him on it one day. I was like, "Why do you do that?" And he goes, "Oh, just to piss white people off."
Before I head upstairs, is the person upstairs really there, wants to ask a question?
Okay, you really want to ask? Yeah, no, the hand's still up.
Okay, great, because that will be the last question. We'll be here and then back upstairs. There we go.
Christy didn't know today was leg day.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you, A and Walt, for coming, and thank you to the spokesman for bringing both of you here. It's great that Spokane's able to do that. I'm catching up on all the books. My wife's way ahead of me. I just finished Hell is Empty. And it took me a long time to reconcile the title with the story. I think I got it figured out, but I'd like your thoughts about how you came up with the title first. And secondly, you write so descriptively about your experience, or Walt's experience in the cold weather. It sounds like to me you have had some maybe near-death experiences being cold, lost, and hungry.
Oh, yeah.
And if there's one in particular you'd care to describe to us. And finally, I really appreciate the respect you show and just the honor you pay to our indigenous people of this country. And if you could describe, because it sounds like you have a lot of connections with Native people, then if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great too. Thank you.
I'll try and go backwards here if my short-term memory can retain this. Like the first thing about the Native spirituality, like in the culture and the society and history and all of that, it's kind of essential because my ranch is right to the south of the Northern Cheyenne and the Crow Reservation. So these are my neighbors, my friends, and some of them family. And so if I'm going to utilize them, in my books and utilize their culture. The big thing is we live in a period in time when people get sensitive about appropriation and all that kind of stuff, but I was also in a panel with a number of Western writers, half of them Native, and the analysis that we came to is that it's okay as long as it's done with the respect and honesty of who these people are and what they are, rather than just using them as set dressing or something like that. But when you're reading that stuff and people do that, then you can tell pretty quickly that that's what they're up to. But yeah, that was an important part, because I knew also that there was going to be a layering to the stories. It kind of is a little bit in that story there. We even get just a little bit of this, Japanese, ancient Japanese spirituality had to come through, and it, that just gives another layer to what it is that we're talking about, as far as the books are concerned. And then, let's see, what was the first part? I don't want to do the scary part last. I'm going to do the scary part last. What was the... Oh, the title, Hell is Empty, yeah. Well, it's from the quote, it's from the Shakespearean quote that, all the, hell is empty and all the devils are here. And in that book, that's a situation where Walt finds himself in a situation where, these are some really bad guys, and they're loose. and there's nobody else that's really there in the immediate vicinity to go after, these guys. It's one of, I think it's Prospero, isn't it? In the Tempest, yeah, because he sees the ship breaking up, and like all the people from his past life are swimming towards the island that he's living on now, and he's like, okay, hell is empty and the devils are all here, like that, and that became essential because it also tied into the analogous aspects of the literary part of the book, which is it's a retelling of Dante's Inferno. And so, all of those devils and all that hell and all of that, the biblical aspects of it, and then Dante's aspects of it all kind of circled around that one bang. And it was fun to do like that because after I used that title, I've noticed it pop up in a number of different places. I had to laugh like that because who was our art director? Who was our art director for Longmire?
I'm going to whiff.
Blass? Dave Blass?
Dave Blass.
Was it Dave Blass? I think it was Dave Blass.
It might have been Dave Blass.
He worked on another show, and it was really kind of funny like that because somebody, people would write me and they would say, this other show, not Longmire, like that, they're actually, they said this, they used a line from your books and they used this plot point that's from your books. And as a matter of fact, they've even got an episode that's called Hell is Empty, like that. And, and I knew that Dave had worked on that show along with our show, like that. And so I asked him one time, I said, hey, Dave, he goes, oh yeah, their author's dead. And so they'd all read your books, Craig. Okay.
Perfect.
So I was like, okay. I used to mountaineer. I used to do a lot of mountaineering like that. And I had a couple of instances like that where, I really got trashed one time, like on a 60-foot leader fall. And they lost me. They didn't know where I was like that. And it was getting late like that. And they thought that I'd fallen, all the way down like about a 2,000-foot escarpment. And so they basically had to give it up like that and go back like that to the base camp like that. Well, it wasn't the base camp, it was the high camp. And they got back to the high camp like that. And I remember waking up, in the middle of the night and looking around, and it was dark, like, and I'm hanging on this rope, like, and I'm thinking to myself, "This is not good," And I'm that crusted all the blood's all on the side of my head and everything, and it's also one of the moments also that kind of led to that third man syndrome, which I utilize a lot in the books because it's an effect that has on Walt. And I heard these voices. I kept hearing these voices saying, "You need to get moving. You've only got a certain amount of time like that before you're going to freeze up like that, and so you need to get up and get going like that," because it was over like 21,000 feet. And so I kept hearing these voices like that telling me where to go and what to do and how to get out of there like that, and how to jimmy myself back up like that and get back up to the above where the crevasse was like that and work my way around the ice fields and get all the way back to where they're. And by the time the sun came up, like I stumbled into the camp. Where everybody was, and they were loading up all their stuff to come back out and look for my body that next day, like that. And I stumbled in, like that, and it was kind of unique, like that, because I remember, them carrying me in, packing me in the blankets, like that, and giving me water and all this. And I remember thinking, every voice I heard last night was somebody who was dead. And they say that that's what your mind does. And I'm living proof of that, like that is it's got this Rolodex of all of these voices that it can go through, and it will find the one that will make you do what it will get you to do to survive. And it's not unique. Like it happens a lot of times. Like people will fall off of a boat and they'll hear voices, people telling them swim this way, like it, or stay with the life preserver, don't get off of it, like it, and things like that. And it's just, you can say that it's a spiritual aspect of it, but you can also say that it's psychological, that your mind is trying to keep you alive, like it. And I just, for me, a lot of times, people will always write and they'll ask, like, boy, there's a lot of snow in your books, and I'm like, I don't write about Key West, so.
All right, well, thank you for giving me so much time to get up here.
Yeah.
Last question.
Craig, I just want to say thank you, as well. It was an excellent surprise having you here. I missed last year's talk, so I was really glad to attend this one. My question is, in your books, you often have a lot of musical references and literary references, and I was just wondering how you choose to pepper those in, and if those come from personal preferences or stuff people suggest, or just your thought process for including a lot of that.
A lot of it's personal. Like, I mean, a lot of the stuff like that is, the things that I'm listening to. Like with this book, with First Frost was a blast. We were talking about it on the drive over. Like, because I said, this was a great and easy book to write because I got to listen to music from 1964 the whole time when I was writing it. Like, and it was great. Like, and there are those type of things like that'll put you in place. I mean, there are certain things like that. Music. The imagery like that, I was funny like that because we were also talking about this earlier too, like that when we were in COVID, Judy and I were like, because we're kind of harsh like that, about what we'll watch. We only have so much time to watch, television or movies like that. And so if we can't find an A Martinez like it to watch, then, we had to try and find something else like that. And we were watching, what we watched? We watched Route 66. We watched that old TV show, Route 66. And the thing is like, I started watching it because I said, I want to get the DVDs of this and watch it because the thing was filmed, like from 1961 to 63 or 64 or something like that. And so it literally is a documentary of all along, Route 66, like as far as like the cars, the clothes, the architecture, all those things like that. And I thought, hey, this is research, this is work, like that. And it was fun, like that, to do that, like that, and include all that information as far as that was concerned, like that. And then we were talking about it because some of the episodes, it's like most TV shows, like that. There's some episodes that are really incredible, and then there's some that are a little bit of filler, like that. And so, but the really, really good ones were by this guy Sterling Siliphant. And, I kept seeing every time we would watch one episode, and it was really, really good. I was like, why haven't I ever heard of this guy? Whatever happened to him? Whatever, my gosh, writing like that, whatever happened to him or anything? So I looked him up on IMDb and discovered that he had actually written the screenplay for In the Heat of the Night and won the Academy Award for that. Like that. So it wasn't like he just quit and went away. Like that. So.
Every time you're here, I think about this. I love the way you tell stories. I just love it so much. Maybe you can help me tell a Spokane Valley City Council story one of these days, because they're harder.
Oh no. There's a good friend of mine like that who's on the city council, like that, and the county commission, and he's a great guy, one of these pillars of society. And he's always like in there fighting the good fight, And I remember, telling him, "You're a better man than I, Gunga Din," like going in there and fighting those things. And I remember him looking at me, and I'm going to use this in a book at some point in time, and now you'll know where it came from. He goes, "Changing county politics, Craig, one graveside at a time." Like it.
Whoa. And another observation. If you're reading a book that you like, will you just drop me an email and say, I'm going to write you a book review? Because I love reading your writing in the paper. It made me so happy.
Thank you. I was really surprised you did that, but I really appreciate it.
Oh,
it's sort of amazing. A thrill.
Yeah. We want more of that, right?
Oh, they're stunning. Oh.
Come on. Yeah.
It's gotten to the point now, like at where I will bug him. Have you written a review yet? Have you written your review? Okay, because I'm waiting, for that review. Like, and he's gotten a little more cagey now. He's like, I'm working on it now.
Well, having you two here tonight has just been a delight, and I know everybody here is excited to get to meet you all tonight. So we've got it set up so you can. And in case you were wondering what I was typing while you were, it's because I have to have an excuse to get you guys to the back. So I was typing in all the winners of our raffle because they were texting me the winners. I'm like, I got to get that in there.
Well, that's cool.
That's my excuse to get you guys to the back.
Yeah, cool.
So nope, not yet. Let's thank them.
Love you, man.
So good. Always so good, my friend. Always good. Loved it. All right.